We will become the most pro-business, pro-entrepreneurship government that has been seen in this country in modern times.
Are Reform now the party to be trusted, not just with immigration, but the economy as well? Today, Nigel Farage gave a big hour-long speech in the City of London, trying to reassure them that Reform will take care of the country's finances, and he absolutely hammered the Tories and the Labour Party for their complete disregard for dealing with the national debt. Take a listen.
But the one subject we really don't discuss, at least the Conservative and Labour parties don't discuss, is the level of national debt. In fact, even last week, the leader of the Conservative Party was saying, in office, we cut the deficit for 14 years. Well, cutting the deficit is a very different thing to cutting debt when you're still borrowing, certainly at peacetime levels, unlike anything ever seen before. They may try to wash their hands and run away from it, but our national debt increased by over 2.5 times during those 14 years. And now
That's
it's
insane.
accelerating. Now it's accelerating in the most extraordinary way. The OBR predictions for the year going back just before the general election was that we'd borrow 77 billion in the year. That estimate is now 130 billion and rising with each and every month. Our debt
Insane.
has risen faster than any other comparable Western country. In fact, in the last 20 years, our debt-GDP ratio is up by nearly 60%. We are doing worse on debt than any of our competitors, and that includes Eurozone countries who are in other deep, deep trouble. Our debt repayments are over 100 billion a year. They're over the level of our defense budget, and the markets are getting nervy. We've seen this with 10 and 30-year gilt yields. In fact, I think my own view is that in 2 budgets' time, the markets will actually force the Chancellor into what will be a genuine austerity budget, at which point the left in the Labour Party won't buy it, and it's why I still stand by my prediction that there will be a general election caused by economic collapse that will happen in 2027.
Pretty damning there of the Tories and the Labour Party, who have allowed the country's debt to absolutely balloon. Now, what detail has actually been discussed here? Nigel Farage not really committing to that many policies here, and he has made the point, and I'm going to show you in a moment, that they don't know exactly what state the country's economy is going to be in, what state the national debt is going to be in, what state the borrowing costs are going to be in at the moment that they take power. So it's very hard for them to commit exactly to how much they will spend and how much how much, where they're going to make cuts and so on. We've got a few little bits on the bone with nothing too new here. He's spoken about the Britannia card to get wealthy Brits back. We had a lot of non-Doms and wealthy people flee the country. This is shocking. 250,000 Brits now living in Dubai. Now, that is a shocking number, given that a significant proportion of those 250,000 Brits will be very wealthy people who have taken a lot of money with them. I believe it's 250 grand that they've been suggesting that they can pay as a one-off payment to come back to Britain. And he's also spoken about immediately scrapping all net zero subsidies the moment that they get into power. That is somewhere where they can make a cost saving. And also he really spoke a lot about business here. Clearly he's talking to the City of London. He wants to talk about how this is a pro-business government that's going to get the economy rolling again. And he says he will immediately remove inheritance tax from family-run businesses and farms, and he will raise tax thresholds. Now, previously they've spoken about raising the income tax threshold. They spoke back in May from 12.5 grand to 20 grand before you start paying any tax. That's going to have to be paid for, right? Now, that could really start getting people back to work, make work pay again. So it may pay for itself, potentially, that policy. But we know that in the short run, at the time of introducing that, to at least quell any market fears, they'll have to say where that money is coming from. So it's going to be what Reform have got a difficult task, because they're promising cuts to taxes, but they're also promising to get the debt down. So they need to be clear exactly where and how they are going to save money. We've spoken about net zero subsidies. We've spoken about getting rid of DEI, but is that really going to cut it? Let's take a look at Christopher Hope from GB News challenging Nigel Farage on exactly this topic.
You said you would raise thresholds, that's presumably income tax thresholds. In May, late May this year, you said you'd increase the basic rate threshold from £12,500 to £20,000. Does that still stand? That is the biggest commitment you've made on that area. And secondly, you haven't mentioned the pensions triple lock. You want to cut spending. Surely that is now under threat.
It's very difficult to take away the triple lock when if you're a party on the right, that you are going to really be relying on the vote of the pensioners.
Bear in mind that from 1988 until the end of Tony Blair's time in office, 1.5 million people paid 40p or more. 1.5 million people paid top rate tax. By the end of next year, 8 million people will be paying 40p or more. Just to give you an illustration of the extent to which the state has grown, the extent to which we're managing our economy terribly, the extent to which we've not allowed businesses to go out and thrive and succeed, so dragging everybody in. We will raise thresholds. I cannot tell you what the state of the economy will be as the next general election approaches. If I'm right, and that election comes in 2027, then the economy will be in an even worse state than any of us in this room can even predict. So how can anybody project on pensions or thresholds or any of those things between now and then?
So clearly avoiding giving any answers on what's going to happen with pensions there. As I said, it's a very sticky topic, because I believe that the average cost of somebody over 80 to the state is 50 grand a year. That is a significant amount of money. The triple lock is extremely expensive, but it is almost impossible as a political decision to get rid of it. Even though it is very, very expensive. So it'd be interesting to see if we get more in the future about where Reform are going to make cuts, other than talking about net zero. With the two-child benefit cap, a lot of people have criticised Reform, saying you guys want to get spending down, you guys don't want to be a big socialist state, but you're talking about getting rid of the two-child benefit cap. I believe Nigel Farage has softened his position on that a bit, in that it has to be where there are two working parents, not people sat at home on benefits trying to get benefits for more and more children. And maybe it could be in the form, I think personally it should be in the form of a tax cut for people with children, as opposed to handing them out money. But I'm not sure exactly how that is going to happen. But one thing that Nigel Farage has been really, really clear on is that in this speech today, is that the current cabinet are completely void of experience. None of them are in business. None of the people on the front benches are in business. The only person in the cabinet with any business experience is James Timpson, who is not an MP, and he is the prisons minister. He doesn't really have any say when it comes to the business policy of this government. I mean, we've got a business secretary who's not been in business, claimed to be a solicitor, but turned out he lied about the fact he was a solicitor. He was never even qualified as a solicitor. Rachel Reeves has worked pretty much in the public sector almost all her life, aside from her brief interlude at Halifax Bank, where she claimed that she was an economist, but she was actually working in the complaints department. There's just no experience whatsoever. They don't understand business at all, and also they don't understand how regulations are really affecting businesses. And Nigel Farage, as you will know, is someone who is very passionate about Brexit, but today he has declared that the way that this government has failed, well, this government and the previous Tory government have failed to slash regulations, it has meant that Brexit has been squandered. Take a listen.
One of my own great frustrations is that Brexit has been squandered. The opportunity to sensibly deregulate, the opportunity to become competitive globally, all of that has been squandered. And the worst thing is that regulations and the way regulators behave with British business is now worse than it was at the time of the Brexit referendum vote. And I apply that with knowledge from everything through the financial services industry to the fishing industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a great shame because so many of us were so excited for Brexit and so excited about all the possible benefits that Brexit could bring, and we haven't really taken advantage of them. Red tape was one of those big things where we thought we can have a big economic advantage there. Of course, there are regulations that you need and make sense for businesses to operate fairly and properly. But I think if you speak to a lot of business owners, they will tell you there is a load of completely superfluous red tape that is a total pain in the arse. I mean, he mentioned farming there. Let me know in the comments, have you watched Clarkson's Farm and seen the amount of regulations that they have to deal with there? That are absolutely insane. I mean, I couldn't stand being a farmer just for that reason. So a lot of pointers to the fact that we're potentially going to have a government where you have experts. That's one thing Nigel Farage has said, is they're going to have experts as ministers. He mentioned there in a speech today that they've had 18 train ministers in 14 years, but none of them even know anything about trains. None of them know how the railways work. You just have all their experience is just having been an MP, right? How on earth can you have, as I say, a business secretary that knows nothing about business? And the same goes for all of the other areas where we have ministers. I think that is one thing where we can trust that Reform are going to have a much more experienced pair of hands. Okay, experience doesn't mean sitting on the benches as an MP for years and years, because the Tories and Labour will say, oh, Reform aren't experienced. No, experience means if you are the business secretary, you have significant experience in business. Okay, if you are the housing minister, you have significant experience in the housing industry, for example. That is how we should judge the experience of those running the country. At least that's Reform thinks, and that's what I think. So, but still, a lot of a way to go for Reform to put meat on the bone, to be very, very clear exactly what their policies are. But here, I think they were sort of sending a signal to the financial services industry, where they were speaking in the city today, that they will not allow the debt to spiral out of control. The markets do not need to react terribly to the risk that they might see a Reform government being seen, as they are a new party that hasn't been in power before. And Zia Yusuf was there, he spoke as well. And Zia Yusuf, he used to work at Goldman Sachs, he'll be known in the industry. And I think there'll be a lot of people in the financial services sector looking at the fact that they've got several people leading the Reform Party who have worked in that industry, understand it, understand how the bond markets work, and that will give them some peace of mind, or at least I should think. Anyway, I'm Chloe Dobbs, thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video and want more news updates, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. It's free and massively helps us out. See you all next time.